Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk a bit about design interviews. I've done a couple of videos in the past talking about how to prepare your portfolio, also how to prepare the whiteboard design exercises. But when it gets to the actual design interviews, especially presentation part, I've been asked a lot, like, what are some of the top or common mistakes that I see? Specifically for this topic, I want to focus on the actual presentation part. For any kind of, if you're interviewing for UX designer role, most of the case, it will be asked to do like a presentation to go over several projects that you are most proud of. Sometimes those presentations are like 1 hour, some are half an hour. I've done different, I think I've seen different, requirement from different companies for sure. But most of the case, I think you'd want to prepare at least 3 projects that you are most proud of, to talk about the project from the beginning to the end. So have a full story, like how do you want to guide your audience at those interviews to show the best of what you have done. First mistake that I've seen many times, it happens so many times, is time control. Like let's say if you're doing like a 1 hour presentation, definitely make sure you ask the recruiter in advance, like what is the structure like and what is the recommendation in terms of time planning. So usually they will help you get an idea. For example, you might have 45 minutes to actually present your projects and leave the 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. And you can start with a brief intro about who you are and then get into the actual projects. So I think, sometimes if they don't give you that details, still always try to plan some time, leave some time at the end for the Q&A session. Although it is a presentation and, we tend to think presentation is a one-way communications, but it's not. I think a lot of the time I see interviewing candidates who are so passionate and keen on talking about their projects, and they run out of time. They prepared a lot of projects to go over. I've seen one candidate in the past trying to talk about five different projects that she has worked on, which are really, I think the project itself is great, but as an interviewer sitting there, I am really curious to ask you some questions, and I want to understand like what's your design thinking behind. And so I want to hear and have some conversation with you. So it's up to you however way you want to plan out the time. You can, if you're comfortable, you can always say at the beginning, like, feel free to ask me any question while I'm presenting. Or if you prefer not to be interrupted during the presentation, you can say like, well, I plan to leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. Let me know if that sounds good to you guys. So just make sure that you are not the one that talking all the time, taking the full hour without any interaction with the audience. So I always think, for a presentation, it's probably one of the most daunting section, because you're in a room probably sitting with 10 different interviewers there, coming from different background, from PM, Eng to designers, and you want to impress them. But do not rush through to the projects, and also do the homework, try to plan the time, practice and rehearsal. If you have say 45 minutes to present and you want to leave 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, try to plan ahead and say you want to talk about 2 projects, maybe one take 20 to 25 minutes. Or if you want to talk to 3 projects, plan like 15 minutes each. So try to practice ahead and do not take up the time you plan to save at the end for Q&A. And my personal experience, I really like to have some feedback while I'm presenting. So what I usually try to do is I will put it clear at the beginning that feel free to stop me if you have any question. But even I don't get any question when I finished presenting one project, I will stop and just ask my audience, what do you guys think? Any questions? And before I move on to the next project. So the next one, common mistake you would want to avoid is don't have any context and dive right into the project. Another way to say it is make sure that you have an introduction to talk about problem statement and the background before you actually dive into the design. No matter you're doing a presentation with your peers, with a broader team, with executives, or doing a presentation at interviews, I think it's always a key to make sure you talk about the background and first, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the challenge? To give a high-level overview in the plain language. Do not use any tag terms. I think so. One of the common mistakes I see all the time at interviews is, ask a design candidate, most of the case, so well about the project you have worked on. You put months effort in those projects and you know it really well. So you want to really get into it fast and start talking about your design process. But before you even start, before you get into any of the design thinking or materials, please make sure you have a high level intro. Just talk about what is the problem you're trying to solve here in a plain language and make sure that all your audience can understand what you're going to talk about. And that's the key to make sure that you don't lose the attention of your audience. Even when you are making a portfolio, I think one suggestion I have is make sure you start with a few just bullet point. Talk about what's the problem statement, what's the challenge, what's your role, and what are the deliverables. So just have a couple of key elements that to outline. Make sure that anytime when people come to this page, before they continue to look at your design works, they have a really clear idea of, okay, this is the story I'm going to look about, and this is interesting. So before I get into the design works, I started getting confused and asking all kinds of questions. Help them on board. As a UX designer, you probably have done many times design onboarding experience to help a user get on board for new product. And same here, when you're presenting or demonstrating your works in a portfolio, you want to help the audience, the users here, to understand what you're going to explain and what are you going to talk about. So this doesn't need to be long, but make sure you spend at least 2 to 3 minutes talking about what is the product, what is the problem statement, and who are the target users, what is the platform you're designing, is that a mobile or web, and then what is your role. So just outline those at the beginning and you will have a solid start. So the last one I want to talk about is try to avoid being the only speaker in the room. So I've come across many times, especially the presentation session for on-site interviews, the candidate tends to talk a lot. Of course, you're the presenter and you're in charge for those sessions, but still, um, you know, I always like to make it more of a dialogue and conversation, rather than, reading something or presenting something like you don't want to really talk to your audience. So I think engagement is a key, and try to avoid just talking on yourself from the beginning to the end, but try to get a sense, get a feel about how your audience are doing. There are many interviews I've sitting in that some of the interviews end up distracted by their laptop or phones or text message, just because they might be losing interest and getting distracted by 10,000 other things. I mean, yes, it is an interview which really important to you as a candidate at this moment, but for the interviewer on their perspective, they might have 10,000 other fires that they need to put off. So you want to do your best to keep their attention and engage with them. So I think when you're doing the presentation, project presentations, talking about the design works that you're most proud of, try to make it a conversation. And sometimes I will pause and ask, just try to get some feedback. For example, I usually when I talk about project, I like to show before and after result. And sometimes if I'm showing a screen of the before screens, which are with tons of problems that need to be solved, you can pause there. And I like to ask my audience, just from their view, just what's their thought by looking at a dashboard with all kinds of data, not structured. And so, not leading question, but just trying to get some feedback. And in that case, you started building the connections between you, the presenter, and your audience, the interviewers. And I feel like the more engaged your audience are and the more questions they ask, it might end up make your presentations longer than what it was planned to. I think it's always a good sign when your interviewers are showing interest on the projects you're working on and asking questions of, for example, why you made certain decisions. So when you're making the presentations, try to engage your audience and make it a conversation, make it a dialogue. I can't believe we were already second half of the year of 2020, and this just has been a lot going on. And I have been really trying to dedicate more time to read a book. So I love reading. I love books. So today just want to share a few books, more UX topic related, I guess. The first one, The Design of Everyday Things. This is a famous book by Don Norman, kind of like my very first book when I was looking to get into the field of UX or product design. And it seems this is the book. If you're going to read one book and you're trying to get into UX, this is, I saw a lot of people recommend this book, so I bought it. And it's such a good book. It's not only digital product, it's talking about, like the title is designed for everyday things. So I think it's really a good intro about how you think and how you can put on a critic lens for looking at everyday things, which is extremely important as a UX designer. When you're looking at a product, even the one you love using every day, you still need to see what can be done better. We're always asking ourselves, and is there something we can do better for the user? So I think this is one of the books you will enjoy doing if you like the idea of problem solving for everyday things. Next book. So this one, Indestructible by Nir Eyal. It's talking about how to control your attention and choose your life. I think I learned a lot from this book. I read it back I think last year while I was working on a smart parental control digital product. And so it's kind of, lead me into this book because I was trying to figure out ways how can we help kids, help the younger generations to be less distractible from the digital devices and how to help them to build a healthier digital habits. So that's kind of how it leads me to this book, but I end up learned so much that I think helped me a lot in everyday life, how to be able to focus on things that I really want to accomplish, and how to deal with distractions or noise. So highly recommended, very handy for this time. The last book I'm going to share with you today is this one, Culture Code. This is written by Daniel Coyle. Culture Code, The Secrets of Highly Successful Groups. So I really enjoyed reading this book because I think it's very light in theories. It has a lot of real stories. It talks about many real world examples from U.S. Navy SEALs team Ideal and San Antonio Spurs. The actual stories, it used those stories to explain, the culture within a team, the difference between toxic culture and a great culture, and how to make a team that really not only work better together in a more efficient way, but also a happier team overall. So highly recommend it if you are interested on building up some leadership skills and also understand more about how to motivate others and how to drive the best of your teammates. So that's all I have for today. So enjoying the weekend, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you guys. Bye.